Now, African literature and cultural discourse have increasingly focused on reclaiming history from colonial distortions, highlighting authentic African voices and narratives. Contemporary writers are revisiting the past to challenge entrenched myths and present nuanced stories of identity, gender, and heritage. Among these voices is Dr. Bunmi Oyinsan, a Nigerian-Canadian author and filmmaker renowned for her interdisciplinary work that spans fiction, film, and education with a Pan-African focus. Today, we speak with Dr. Oyinsan about her latest novel, A Ladder of Bones, which tackles the legacy of colonialism through a compelling counter-narrative that centers African experiences and perspectives. Her work not only redefines historical storytelling, but also underscores the importance of cultural reclamation in shaping Africa's future. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, A Ladder of Bones is a very intriguing title. Can you tell us what inspired you to write the book?
You mean the title?
The title and why you wrote the book.
Okay, two things. The first point is that a result of my meditation about the powers of memory and also the legacies of slavery, slave trade, empire, and the way in which these continue to shape, you know, our lives as Africans and Africans in the diaspora. I set the story in several African countries, as well as the African diaspora, around the lives of 5 young people who suffer all kinds of violence, some economic, some physical, some psychological, that we often do not link to neocolonialism and the current global economic infrastructure that are set up to keep Africa and Africans down. The second reason is my resistance to the way in which traditionally history is taught, you know, to us. I mean, as someone who grew up here and went to school here, I am determined, you know, that as many of the generations that come behind me do not go through the same, you know, system that I went through, where European history and all their victories were the highlights of the histories that we were taught at the expense of Africa's contribution and our own ancestors' contribution, especially a so-called history book written by a British woman about Nigeria, Ellen Thorpe, whose title I deliberately signify on her book, her historical account of pre-colonial Nigeria and the immediate like the eve of our independence, is titled Ladder of Bones. And in that, she paints, you know, the works of missionaries and colonizers as saviors who made sacrifices of their bones and sweat to help us develop. And I'm turning that on its head, that metaphor on its head, and saying, look, what are the real prices that we had to pay, that we continue to pay, you know, for slavery, for slave trade, for colonization, for empire, and the ongoing effects of neocolonialism.
Okay, so what are the key takeaways and insights in the book for your readers, and how can they apply that, you know, to their own current experiences?
I would be satisfied and gratified if readers would leave the book, you know, determined to question everything, question every history that has not been written by us, question what they are, you know, the way in which Africa is portrayed, question even so-called attempts and help by people, do-gooders, who say they are helping us, you know, and then take from us with one hand whilst they are, you know, pushing us down with the other. A key takeaway would be for them to recognize that within us, we're not in any way inferior to people from any other continent or people of any other color. So the fact that our continent, richest in resources, bar none, is still also the poorest, are things that we need to face. And one of the ways we can face them is by going back to our history. knowing where we went wrong so that we can, plan better for today and then and the future.
Well, it looks like a very interesting read. I like the dramatic front page that would, pique one's interest. But it looks like something that you really did a lot of research on. I'd like to know where you got your materials from and all of the historical, cultural material you used for this book.
Well, first I must confess, I am fanatical about history. I've always loved history. So I get lost, researching history. So a lot of my research was done based on history, and I'm also committed to writing, gender issues. Everything I've written ever since I started putting pen to paper have come from, the point of view of having my voice there as a woman, and so I've had to depend on other writers. Reading other writers has also been one of the ways I've researched into doing this work. And then, believe it or not, the news. A lot of the situations that I recreate or fictionalize are items or things that struck me when listening to the news.
Now, talking about reaching out to the do-gooders that you talked about earlier, that you said they take with one hand even while giving with the other, shouldn't that be targeted to our political leaders who oftentimes are the one actually actively seeking aid from them?
Thank you. Absolutely. It must. Yes, it must, because, and we continue to sink deeper and deeper. I think there are rumors right now that we're actually looking everywhere we can to get even more loans to even compound our level of indebtedness. Of course, our leaders must be challenged. But we also know that our issues, yes, corruption is a major part of our problems as African countries. But we also know that corruption thrives on poverty. Poverty feeds corruption. And yeah, we must continue. So must we continue to fight corruption? Yes. Must we continue to challenge our leaders to be more upstanding? Yes. But we must also put as much effort into agitating, for economic, our rights to exploit, our own resources, determine the prices of our own resources, so that, and then fight to stop being this extractive continent that we have been, where our resources have continued to be extracted in order to enrich other parts of the world.
Well, you've been an active advocate for literacy, and also closing the reading gap.
Yeah.
Where would you say we are in that?
Well, I would say we're not nearly where I'd like us to be. And I think the recent results, the WAEC results, kind of proves, that we need to do more in terms of prioritizing education. We cannot have proper levels of literacy if we continue to fund education as poorly as I think between 5 and 7% of our budget is being allocated to education, as against the least recommended, I think about 15 to 20 by UNESCO. We have to prioritize education, if we want to address the issue of literacy.
And so how can technology be leveraged, to support literacy development and reading skills, seeing as the average Nigerian youth right now is on one social media platform or the other, and they are stuck to their devices right now?
My attitude has been to meet them where they are, which is what has actually started a channel for children's literature. Because like I kind of recognized, that one just has to find where these children's interests are and then provide resources, that can continue to improve, and ignite their love of literature. And yeah. So
if you could change one policy today about the reading culture in Nigeria, or that would boost or improve the reading culture, what would that be?
Policy, education-wise, it would be to make reading for leisure a compulsory part of the curriculum.
How do you mean?
Say dedicate a certain number of hours a week where children have access to books and things, and where they can actually pick and sit and read. I grew up at a time when our libraries were functional. My weekends were made exciting because I looked forward to Saturdays, that I spent in the library in town in Port Harcourt where I grew up, and I took enough books to last me the rest of the week, but right now, your average Nigerian child, unless they're from a certain economic bracket, have no access to, those kind of public facilities. We must also, fund schools to have libraries, fund public libraries, so that reading books become part of every child's growing up, and they would have the kind of memories, and connection that I have to books and literature.
Okay, so as we wrap up, let's talk about the reviews, ratings, and discussions about your book, and then, of course, what next? Any other projects in the pipeline?
Oh yes, so long as I have breath, I'll continue to write and then continue to also use whatever resources are available to me to reach the kind of reading audiences that I have. So far, so good. The reviews have been, very good. It's not actually publicly out yet, but a few advanced copies have been sent, to universities, to readers, and it's been fantastic. The kind of reviews we're getting. At least 2 universities in Canada have already put it on their reading list for the winter term.
Great.
That's interesting. Well, we wish you all the best in all your future aspirations. Dr. Bunmi Oyinsan is a Nigerian Canadian author and filmmaker. Thank you for your time on the show.